Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something really critical, a reality that's maybe more urgent, more complex than many of us realize.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the hidden battles for our planet's resources. Now, we often think about national security, armies, borders, but what if protecting the Earth itself comes with this escalating human cost,
Mm-hmm.
a kind of hidden battleground where lives, livelihoods, fundamental rights are on the line every single day.
It's happening right now.
So this deep dive, it's built from a really fascinating stack of sources. We've got reports from the International Committee of the Red Cross, Global Witness,
Very strong reports there.
academic analyses looking at resource conflicts in Nepal, insights from the Indigenous Environmental Network, and investigations into, well, the nickel industry, for instance.
Yeah, that's a key one for the energy transition.
Our mission today, to sort of pull out the most important nuggets, help you connect the dots between these global challenges, and really understand why this stuff should matter to all of us. And look, here's where it gets truly interesting.
Definitely.
Okay, let's start unpacking this. There's a powerful, undeniable shift that our sources really highlight: climate change. It's not just an environmental issue anymore.
Not at all.
It's rapidly emerging as, well, an existential threat to humanity. That's the language used in the 2022 U.S. National Security Strategy, even.
Right. And what's fascinating there is seeing how that conversation has evolved, at the highest levels. The UN Security Council, for example, they've been looking at the link between climate change and insecurity since, 2007?
Wow, that far back.
Yeah. But they're increasingly and explicitly acknowledging how climate-related risks, think about water scarcity in the Lake Chad Basin, for instance, how these risks can directly fuel traditional conflicts, fuel instability.
So it's moved beyond just theory.
Exactly. It's shifting from this maybe abstract environmental idea to a very, very tangible security threat.
So it's not just about, I don't know, melting ice caps in far-off places. Our sources point to really concrete impacts that directly undermine stability.
Like what, specifically?
Well, a sharp increase in natural disasters, for one. Mass displacement, forcing people to migrate. And escalating crises in food, water, energy supplies.
Basic necessities.
Right. This isn't just environmental degradation we're talking about. It's about the very foundations of, human lives, vital infrastructure. So what does this do to how we think about national security?
Well, it forces us to broaden the definition, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We're seeing how these environmental stressors, they act as threat multipliers.
Threat multipliers. Explain that a bit.
They basically take existing vulnerabilities, poverty, political instability, whatever, and make them worse. Create new ones, even. When a region gets hit by repeated droughts or floods, that impacts harvests, right?
Of course.
It drives people from their homes, puts immense pressure on resources that are already dwindling, and that creates, ripe conditions for social unrest, for conflict.
So national security isn't just about armies at the border anymore.
No, it's also about internal resilience. It's about the well-being of your population when they're facing these massive climate impacts. It's a fundamental rethink, really.
Okay, so if we're talking about immediate, life or death resources,
Yeah.
water has got to be right at the top.
Absolutely top.
The International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, they highlight how access to drinking water is, and I'm quoting here, increasingly a matter of survival in conflict zones. Just that phrase.
It grabs you, doesn't it? And when you connect that to the bigger picture, the crisis, it becomes even starker. Armed conflict, it just devastates infrastructure, water pipes, treatment plants, gone. And then climate change comes along and depletes the natural sources on top of that. Think about Syria. Over 10 years of war, water supply slashed by 30–40%.
That's huge.
Or Mariupol in Ukraine. I mean, there are reports of people trapped by combat having to melt snow or using water from radiators because there was just no running water. None.
Melting snow.
Yeah.
Using radiator water. It brings home the sheer desperation, doesn't it?
Yeah,
How
sure.
quickly things unravel.
It does. And these aren't isolated horror stories. They're illustrations of water becoming a weapon or maybe just a casualty of war.
And the ICRC also points out this really sobering statistic. 14 of the 25 countries most vulnerable to climate change, they're also embroiled in conflict.
14 out of 25.
It seems almost counterintuitive that these critical issues, conflict and climate vulnerability, are often treated separately, siloed. Why is that? Did the sources give any insight?
That's a really crucial question, and it points to, I think, a systemic failure. Look, water scarcity itself rarely starts a war. That's usually not the spark.
No.
But The absence of effective ways to manage disputes over water, mechanisms to mediate competing interests,
Right.
that can profoundly erode the social fabric. It can push communities towards violence.
When there's no way to talk it out or find a fair solution.
Exactly. And the consequences are immense, especially when you think that global water demand is projected to surge by, what, 30% by 2050?
30%, that's enormous pressure.
The urgency isn't just palpable, it's practically screaming at us.
So, okay, given these really dire implications, particularly in conflict zones,
Yeah.
what can actually be done? What strategies are our sources highlighting?
Well, the ICRC, they outline 3 really crucial requests. Think of it as a roadmap. First, and this is fundamental, respect international humanitarian law, IHL.
The rules of war.
Precisely. And those rules specifically protect water sources, infrastructure as civilian objects. They shouldn't be targeted, period.
Okay, number 1, follow the law.
Second, governments, local authorities, even the private sector, they need to prioritize and support effective partnerships. Build resilient water networks before a crisis hits. Don't wait for disaster.
Proactive, not reactive. Makes sense.
And third, and this one's maybe the trickiest, strengthen climate action and finance in fragile states. And this involves accepting maybe a certain level of risk to ensure funding actually reaches the most vulnerable people on the ground.
So don't let the difficulty or the risk be an excuse for inaction.
Exactly. These aren't just polite suggestions, They're vital for survival in many places.
Okay, this next part that our sources uncover is, well, it's particularly grim, but it's essential, I think, for understanding the human toll in these battles. It's this really sobering reality, protecting our planet. It's become an incredibly deadly job for some people.
Tragically so.
Global Witness reports that 196 land and environmental defenders were murdered in 2023, just last year.
196.
And think about this. Since they started tracking back in 2012, the total is over 2,100 people.
2,106.
That's basically an activist killed every other day.
Yeah.
It reveals this brutal hidden front line in the climate crisis.
It really does. And this raises that vital question. Who are these individuals and where is this happening most?
Right. Where's the danger greatest?
Latin America, consistently.
Yeah.
It accounts for the vast majority of these killings. A staggering 85% of the cases in 2023 were in Latin America.
85%.
Colombia is the deadliest country, 79 murders last year. That's the highest annual total Global Witness has ever documented for any single country.
79 in 1 year.
And then you have Mexico and Honduras, 18 killings each. Brazil, 25. These are people on the ground, often in really remote areas, just trying to protect their homes, their land, their environment.
And it tends to be the most vulnerable communities who bear the brunt, doesn't it?
Absolutely. In 2023, 43% of those murdered were Indigenous peoples.
Nearly half.
Nearly half. 12% were women, Afro-descendant communities, small-scale farmers, journalists, lawyers, even park rangers. They also make up a significant proportion of the victims. It just hammers home the disproportionate impact on those who live closest to nature, who depend most directly on it.
Their survival is literally tied to the land they're defending.
Intrinsically linked, yes.
So what are they fighting against? What specific activities or industries are driving this violence?
The data points very clearly to specific sectors. Mining was the biggest driver in 2023, linked to 25 killings globally. Over half of those were in Latin America. Yeah. And then agribusiness, large-scale farming, and logging are also major contributors. These industries, they often involve huge land appropriation, massive resource extraction.
Which inevitably clashes with local communities.
Directly clashes. Communities rely on those same lands for their livelihoods, their culture, their very survival, so the stakes are incredibly high for both sides. But only one side is routinely paying with their lives.
So the murders, horrific as they are, they're just one part of this. Our sources detail this whole sinister arsenal of other tactics used to silence defenders. What else are we seeing?
Indeed. Beyond the lethal attacks, criminalization has become disturbingly common. It's a key tactic.
Criminalization, you mean framing activists as criminals?
Exactly. We're seeing this global surge in anti-protest laws. Look at the UK, for example. New laws there allow for incredibly harsh sentences for peaceful climate protesters. We're talking 6 months in jail for a 30-minute slow march.
6 months for a peaceful protest.
Or even 4 or 5 years for activists who just participated in a Zoom call planning a protest.
Years for a Zoom call. That seems disproportionate.
Hugely. And in the U.S., you have these critical infrastructure laws popping up. They put activists at risk of serious felony charges, basically reclassifying peaceful protest as a major crime if it happens near a pipeline or certain facilities.
Wow.
And it's not just legal threats. We even see direct violence linked to this suppression. The tragic killing of Manuel Paez-Terán by a police officer during a forest protest in the U.S., that's a chilling example.
And as if, you know, killings and legal suppression weren't enough,
Yeah.
our sources talk about something even more insidious: disappearances.
Ah, yes. Forced disappearances. This is a particularly cruel form of
Yeah.
violence. It's designed to terrorize, to paralyze not just the victim's family, but the entire community.
How so?
Well, take the case of Ricardo Lagunes and Antonio Diaz in Mexico. It's harrowing. They were forcibly disappeared in 2023. They'd been challenging mining abuses by Ternium, a major steel producer.
And what happened to them?
They're still missing. Their families are in absolute limbo, just living with this agonizing uncertainty day after day. And it's not isolated. Over 93 land and environmental defenders have been disappeared in Mexico between 2006 and 2023.
93.
And over 40% of them are still unfound. It creates this chilling climate of fear that just radiates outwards.
Beyond disappearances, there are also abductions mentioned. What's the difference or the aim there?
Yeah, we're seeing this tactic increasingly in Asia, according to the sources. Jayhed Tamano and Junila Castro, two young environmental advocates in the Philippines, they were abducted, held for 17 days in 2023.
Why? What were they doing?
They were opposing these massive land reclamation projects in Manila Bay linked to building a new international airport.
And what happened during those 17 days?
They described psychological torture, emotional blackmail, being forced to sign false confessions. They're incredibly lucky, frankly, to survive and be able to tell their story. The aim is pretty clear: break their spirit, intimidate anyone else who might speak out, create that climate of fear that ensures silence.
It really does sound like a systematic effort to just erase opposition. Did the sources ever explore the arguments from the other side, maybe from the industries or governments involved? Or is the focus really on the defenders' experiences?
The sources we looked at, they largely focus on the defenders' experiences and the mechanisms of suppression they face. What becomes clear, though, is that this systematic effort, it's often underpinned by this really toxic mix.
A mix of what?
Authoritarian regimes, for one, widespread corruption, organized crime playing a role, and of course, corporate exploitation driving the resource extraction.
It's a complex web.
Absolutely. Look at Nicaragua, where reports say indigenous peoples face systematic murder that seems facilitated by the government. Or Honduras, described in some analyses as basically a narco-state, where drug trafficking groups have deeply undermined governance. These forces create an environment where fundamental rights just get trampled, and defenders are left completely exposed, often with very little hope of getting justice.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly and take a deep dive into Nepal, which our sources highlight as a really powerful real-world example of how all these issues, environment, resources, security, play out.
It's a fascinating case study.
It's striking, isn't it? Nepal contributes very little to global emissions, a tiny fraction. Yet 80% of its population is at risk from natural and climate-induced hazards.
80%. It's staggering.
And the cost: nearly $6 billion in physical and economic damage over the last 40 years.
It's an incredible paradox, isn't it? So little contribution, such huge vulnerability, and that vulnerability, it's rooted in Nepal's geography. It's got this fragile geology, a really diverse landscape, dramatic climate variation.
So different risks in different places.
Exactly. Each region faces unique and severe threats. In the high mountains, you worry about avalanches, glacial lake outburst floods, GLOFs.
GLOFs, right? Heard about those.
In the middle hills, it's landslides, droughts. And down in the Terry Plains, it's devastating floods, but also intense heat waves. It's a country really living on the edge of climate instability.
So how does that translate into daily life? And more importantly, into, tangible security concerns for the country and its people?
Well, the sources detail how these climate disasters directly hit critical infrastructure. Roads get washed out. Electricity networks fail. Even huge projects like the Malamshi water supply project near Kathmandu, supposed to solve water issues, it was ravaged by a flash flood in 2021.
Setbacks like that must have huge consequences.
Massive. It can trigger widespread water crises, energy crises. It forces people to move massive internal migration. And all of that creates significant social, even political instability.
And does it affect the state's ability to respond?
It can, yeah. Even the military faces challenges. Vital security installations themselves might be vulnerable to extreme weather. That could potentially hinder the Army's ability to mobilize during a disaster when they're needed most. It's this multifaceted threat that cuts right to the core of national stability.
So despite this clear and frankly present danger, what's missing in Nepal's approach, according to the sources? Where are the gaps in how they view national security?
Yeah, that's a critical insight. Nepal's 2016 national security policy, it does briefly mention environmental security, so it's on the radar.
Sort of.
But it doesn't seem to fully recognize climate change as a direct national security threat in itself. There appears to be a real lack of coordination between the environmental agencies and the security agencies.
Working in silos again?
Seems like it. And this often leads to a very top-down approach that tends to fail. It doesn't address the root causes of vulnerability, and it leaves local communities, especially the poor, the marginalized, at a huge disadvantage. The study in Balatu village really exemplifies this.
Balaku Village. Tell us about that. What kind of specific resource conflicts are playing out there on the ground?
Well, the study there highlights really common everyday disputes. Conflicts over land, water, forests, pasture land, the absolute basics people rely on to survive.
What causes those disputes?
All sorts of things. Land conflicts might stem from historical feudal systems or unclear ownership deeds, or just the pressures of urbanization pushing people out.
And water. You mentioned water scarcity earlier.
Yeah, big source of conflict. It can range from disputes over who owns the water source itself to how water is shared in irrigation systems. You know, the classic problem. Farmers at the head of the canal get plenty of water, while those at the tail end get hardly any.
Which causes major friction, I imagine.
Huge friction. And the study also found conflicts between, say, village elites and local people over land ownership, or between outside developers coming in and locals, where often the poor feel exploited. It's this complex web of interwoven struggles.
So how do people try to resolve these disputes in a place like Balaku? What works, what doesn't?
It's a real mix, according to the source. You have traditional, informal methods sitting alongside more formal systems.
Traditional methods, like what?
Things like Dharma Bakun, which apparently involves sacred tests or oaths to resolve disputes, or Jakri Rakne, where shamans are consulted to find solutions.
Wow. Alongside courts.
Alongside formal court systems, yeah, and local government trying to mediate. But here's the key takeaway from the study. The existing conflict management, whether formal or informal, it very often benefits the powerful, the elites.
Leaving the vulnerable behind.
Exactly. It needs significant reform, the study concludes, to actually serve all community members fairly. It's this constant struggle for just resolution.
It all sounds like such a daunting challenge. But, our sources don't just paint a bleak picture, they also offer pathways forward.
Thankfully, yes.
And one theme that keeps coming up, something absolutely vital but often overlooked, is the role of indigenous knowledge.
Yes, this is such a crucial point the sources emphasize.
Why is it so crucial, yet so often sidelined?
Well, first, indigenous peoples are disproportionately impacted by all of this climate change, resource extraction. We saw that with the defenders being targeted. Another example from the sources is the Bajau people in Indonesia.
What's happening there?
Their lives, their livelihoods, they're being devastated by nickel mining. Nickel needed for EV batteries, part of the green transition, but it's contaminating their waters, causing rampant deforestation.
So the solution creates another problem.
Precisely. Yet these same communities possess this incredible, deep, traditional knowledge about sustainable resource management, about conservation, powerful, time-tested solutions that, frankly, Western science or policy often overlooks.
So where's the disconnect, if the knowledge is there?
The disconnect is huge. More than half of the minerals needed for this green energy transition, they're located in or near indigenous lands.
More than half.
Yes. But these communities, they're often not consulted. Their rights are ignored. Their knowledge systems, even though bodies like the IPCC are increasingly acknowledging them, they still tend to get sidelined in favor of what's seen as more, hard scientific or economic evidence.
So what are the indigenous voices asking for? What's their core message to the world based on these sources?
It's powerful. Leaders like Jennifer Lassenbang from Malaysia, Hindu Umaru Ibrahim from Chad, they're featured in the sources, and their message isn't asking for charity. It's asking for equality, for trust.
Trust us.
Exactly. They're urging governments, grant indigenous peoples rights over their traditional lands, ensure those rights are actually respected in practice, and provide direct access to climate finance for indigenous-led organizations, not just through intermediaries.
Let them lead.
As Jennifer Lassenbang put it so well, trust us, let us lead, we will take you with us. It's really a plea for genuine partnership, recognizing their deep ancestral connection to the land and its well-being.
Beyond that crucial role of indigenous knowledge, our sources also lay out some broader, more systemic recommendations for governments, businesses, international bodies. What are the key takeaways there for building a more just and sustainable future?
Yeah, there are some clear, actionable insights. First, for governments, they absolutely must create a safe environment for defenders. That means enforcing existing laws protecting them, but also establishing new binding instruments.
Like what?
Something like the Escazú Agreement in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's groundbreaking because it guarantees rights to access information, public participation, and crucially, justice in environmental matters. We need more regional agreements like that.
Okay, safety and strong legal frameworks. What else for governments?
They need to systematically document and analyze attacks against defenders. Transparency is key, and ensure participation from affected communities. And critically, facilitate access to impartial justice for everyone. Not just justice on paper, but real, accessible justice.
Makes sense. What about businesses? What's their responsibility in all this?
Businesses have a huge responsibility here. They need to implement robust due diligence across their entire supply chains.
Due diligence meaning?
Meaning they need to actively identify, prevent, and fix human rights abuses and environmental harm linked to their operations, including their suppliers and subcontractors.
All the way down the chain.
All the way down. And a key part of that is having a zero-tolerance policy for illegal land acquisition and for violations of free, prior, and informed consent, FPIC.
FPIC, that's the principle that communities have to give their consent freely before projects start, based on full information, right?
Exactly, without coercion. It's not just a moral thing anymore. It's increasingly a legal and certainly a reputational imperative for companies.
Okay, and finally, what about the big international bodies? The ones involved in climate talks like the UNFCCC or biodiversity talks like the CBD, what do they need to do?
Their role is crucial. They must facilitate genuine access and participation for land and environmental defenders within those global processes, especially Indigenous voices.
Make sure they're actually in the room and heard.
Exactly. Publicly recognizing the crucial role these defenders play and actively integrating Indigenous knowledge and practices into climate decision-making, it's not optional anymore. It's absolutely essential if we want effective global action. Ignoring these voices, ignoring this knowledge, it's just self-defeating at this point.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive, it's really laid bare that these battles for our planet's resources, they're intensely personal. They're often violent, and they're deeply, deeply intertwined with global security.
Absolutely.
From water scarcity turning deadly in conflict zones to the truly brutal silencing of environmental defenders. The human cost of climate change and unchecked resource exploitation, well, it's undeniable.
And it highlights such a critical truth, doesn't it? A truly green future, the sustainable future we talk about.
Yeah.
It simply cannot be built on red violence. It can't.
Green can't be built on red.
No. The pursuit of sustainable energy, sustainable resource management, it must go hand in hand with justice, with human rights, and with the empowerment of those people on the front lines, those who are literally sacrificing their lives for the planet.
So, thinking about all this, what does it mean for you listening right now? As a consumer, as a citizen, as just a member of this global community, what responsibility do we carry in recognizing these hidden battles for resources, for rights? How could we ensure that our own demands for progress, for green technologies, for economic growth, how do we make sure they don't inadvertently perpetuate the very problems, the very violence we're trying to solve?
It's a profound question.
It really is. And it's one worth continuing to explore, I think, in how we live, how we consume, and how we advocate for change.